January 8, 1943, 0540 a.m., Stalingrad. The wind cuts like broken glass. Inside a splintered command dugout beneath the ruins of the Univermag department store, a kerosene lamp flickers against concrete walls blackened by smoke. Frost creeps along the ceiling beams. Every breath fogs the air. Generaloberst Friedrich Paulus stands rigid over a field table covered in maps that no longer match reality. Outside, the Soviet artillery begins again. The first shells land short, dull thuds against snow and rubble. Then the range corrects, the earth trembles, plaster sifts down like flour from the ceiling. Somewhere above, a horse screams, then silence. Then another impact, closer. Paulus does not flinch, but his chief of staff, Generalleutnant Arthur Schmidt, does, just slightly. You can almost feel the cold pressing in. It isn't just temperature, it's pressure, a tightening ring of steel. 2 days earlier, a Soviet delegation had approached under a white flag. They carried terms from Colonel General Konstantin Rokossovsky, authorized by Marshal Georgy Zhukov. Surrender, food, medical care, survival. The message was delivered with clinical calm. Further resistance was pointless. Paulus refused. He still believed in relief. He had to. Operation Uranus had slammed shut the Soviet encirclement back in November 1942. Romanian flanks shattered, German supply lines severed. The Sixth Army, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, was now trapped inside a frozen cauldron stretching barely 50 kilometers across. 250,000 men. Now, fewer. Combat, frostbite, hunger, and typhus had been thinning the ranks for weeks. Horses were long gone, eaten. Ammunition rationed, fuel nearly non-existent. Tanks immobilized, their engines dead from cold and lack of petrol. Yet Berlin insisted, hold the Volga. Reinforcements were coming. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein had launched Operation Winter Storm in December. Panzer divisions clawed within 50 kilometers of the pocket. Close enough to hear the guns, some said. Close enough to hope. But hope is a dangerous ration. By early January, Winter Storm had collapsed under Soviet counterattacks. Manstein withdrew. The corridor would not open. Inside the pocket, the Luftwaffe was supposed to sustain the army by air. It was Hermann Göring's promise. 500 tons per day, he had assured Hitler. The reality? Sometimes 80, sometimes less. On some days, nothing at all. Transport planes, U-52s and HE-111s stripped for cargo, were shot from the sky or crippled on icy runways. The airfields at Pitomnik and Gumrak became graveyards of twisted metal and frozen corpses. Wounded men begged to be loaded onto outbound flights. Most were left behind.
Night settles over Stalingrad without mercy. There are no streetlights. No intact buildings, only the dull orange flicker of distant fires and the pale reflection of snow under a moon that offers no warmth. Inside the southern pocket headquarters, the air feels heavier than before, not just from smoke and damp wool, but from the weight of unspoken truth. A radio operator adjusts his headset, fingers trembling from cold. Static. Then a faint signal from Gumrak airfield. 2 transports landed, one destroyed on approach, runway under artillery fire. The message cuts off. Paulus stares at the map. Gumrak is their last operational airstrip. Pitomnik fell days earlier, overrun after waves of Soviet infantry advanced through snowdrifts and craters, stepping over wounded men who could no longer crawl toward evacuation planes. Luftwaffe crews had tried to land under mortar fire. Some aircraft never even stopped rolling before taking off again, leaving stretchers behind in the snow. Now Gumrak is barely functional, and without it, the Sixth Army is sealed shut. At 02:10 a.m., a staff officer hands Paulus the latest Luftwaffe delivery figures. 72 tons delivered yesterday. Minimum survival requirement, 300. For weeks, Hermann Göring had assured Adolf Hitler that the Luftwaffe could sustain the encircled army indefinitely. The Reichsmarshal had spoken confidently, almost casually. Now those promises echo hollow inside a frozen grave. Paulus runs his finger along the columns of numbers. Ammunition, flour, fuel, medical supplies. Each line is red. Arthur Schmidt breaks the silence. Mein General, even if deliveries doubled, it would not be enough. There it is. Not despair, not panic. Mathematics. Far to the west, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein reads his own reports by lamplight at Army Group Dawn headquarters. He knows the truth as well. His December counteroffensive, Operation Winter Storm, had been bold, precise, almost brilliant. Panzer divisions had punched toward the Mishkova River. For a moment, the impossible seemed within reach. But Soviet reserves, fresh, massive, relentless, had slammed into his flanks. Manstein requested permission for Paulus to break out and link up. Hitler refused. The Sixth Army would hold Stalingrad as a fortress. Fortresses are meant to be supplied. This one is starving. Back in the pocket, dawn creeps in, gray and silent. Paulus walks through a forward medical bunker. The smell hits first. Gangrene, blood, unwashed bodies. Rows of wounded lie shoulder to shoulder on straw blackened by weeks of use. Some are missing limbs, others stare blankly at the ceiling, lips cracked and blue. A surgeon, sleeves stiff with frozen blood, salutes weakly. "We have no anesthetic left, Herr General." A young corporal grips Paulus's coat as he passes. "Are we breaking out?" The question hangs there. Paulus looks at the boy, no older than 20, frostbitten fingers wrapped in dirty bandages, eyes wide, desperate for reassurance. You can almost feel the pause stretch. "No," Paulus says. January 30th, 1943, 11:40 a.m., Southern Pocket, Stalingrad. The radio operator stands frozen, headset pressed tight against his ears. Signal from Führerhauptquartier, priority transmission. Inside the cellar headquarters beneath the shattered Univermag building, the air is stale and metallic. Soviet artillery rumbles in the distance like a slow, rolling storm. Paulus looks up. The message is decoded carefully, line by line. Adolf Hitler announces that Friedrich Paulus is hereby promoted to General Field Marshal, a Field Marshal of Germany, the highest rank in the Wehrmacht. Arthur Schmidt exhales sharply. A few officers straighten instinctively. For a brief second, something almost like pride flickers in the room. But Paulus does not smile, because every man there understands the unspoken meaning. No German field marshal has ever been captured alive. The message continues, praise for heroic endurance, unwavering loyalty, the eternal gratitude of the fatherland. Between the lines lies a command that is never spoken aloud. You know what is expected. Suicide. Paulus folds the paper once. He does not look at Schmidt. Outside, Soviet infantry are advancing through adjacent blocks. Machine gun fire crackles closer each hour.
German defensive positions are collapsing inward, compressed into a few city squares. Food is gone, ammunition nearly so. The wounded lie stacked in corridors above. The promotion feels like a funeral wreath. For weeks, Hitler had insisted the Sixth Army fight to the last man. He envisioned Stalingrad as a symbol, an unbreakable bastion of will. In Berlin, maps still showed tidy arrows and defensive lines, but here, the map is rubble. By January 30th, the southern pocket contains barely 20,000 combat-capable troops. Many units no longer exist as organized formations. Battalion commanders lead platoon-sized remnants. Company officers command handfuls of men. Some have not eaten in days. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, noses. Rifles jam in the cold. You can almost hear the breathing of an army at the edge of extinction. Paulus sits alone for a moment after the officers disperse. Field Marshal. He thinks of others who wore the rank, von Blücher, Hindenburg, von Rundstedt. None were captured, none were encircled like this. He removes his cap and places it on the table. Is this honor or pressure? A pistol lies nearby, standard issue. The implication is clear enough. Above ground, Soviet troops push closer to the central square. T-34 tanks grind over snow-covered debris. Red Army soldiers shout to one another as they clear building after building. In the northern pocket, General Karl Strecker's forces are barely hanging on. Communication between pockets is sporadic. The Sixth Army no longer functions as a single entity. It is fragments, broken teeth in a frozen jaw. Arthur Schmidt returns with updated reports. Soviet forces have reached within 300 meters of headquarters. Paulus nods. No dramatics, no visible panic, just the steady collapse of distance. Schmidt hesitates before speaking again. Mein Feldmarschall, there is still the question of your decision. The word hangs heavy. Paulus looks up slowly. You mean whether I shoot myself? Schmidt says nothing. The artillery resumes, closer now. Plaster falls from the ceiling. Somewhere above, a wall collapses in a thunder of bricks.
January 31st, 1943, 07:35 a.m. Univermag department store ruins. Boots on frozen concrete. Not German boots. Soviet voices echo down the stairwell, sharp, controlled, cautious. A burst of automatic fire rattles above, then silence. Dust drifts from the ceiling beams. Inside the cellar, Friedrich Paulus sits upright at the field table. Field Marshal of a dead army. Arthur Schmidt stands beside him, face pale but composed. A few remaining staff officers grip pistols they know they will not fire. The door at the top of the stairs splinters open. Heavy steps descend. A Red Army officer appears first, submachine gun raised, eyes scanning the dim bunker. Behind him, more soldiers fan out. Snow clings to their boots, steam rises from their breath. For a moment, no one speaks. Then a Soviet officer steps forward, Colonel Fyodor Yelchenko of the 64th Army. His uniform is worn but orderly. He studies the scene, taking in the maps, the burned papers, the exhausted men. Who is in command here? Paulus rises slowly. I am Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, commander of the 6th Army. The words sound almost ceremonial, almost unreal. Yelchenko nods once. You are under arrest. Outside, the battle continues in pockets.
Isolated machine gun bursts, scattered resistance, but the southern group has effectively collapsed. German soldiers emerge from cellars and trenches, hands raised, faces hollow. Some stagger, some weep openly, others move with blank resignation. You can almost hear what is breaking. Not just an army, a myth. For months, Nazi propaganda had painted the Wehrmacht as unstoppable, invincible, superior in will and discipline. Now, a field marshal stands captured in a bombed-out basement, alive. Paulus is escorted upstairs into daylight. The sky over Stalingrad is colorless. Smoke drifts across ruins that no longer resemble a city. Soviet soldiers line the streets, watching silently as the German commander walks past. No cheers, no jeers, just cold observation. He is taken to a temporary command post where Soviet officers question him. They treat him formally, professionally. One officer asks almost conversationally, "Why did you not surrender earlier?" Paulus does not answer, because the answer is layered in obedience, ambition, fear, and belief. Because surrendering earlier would have meant defying Hitler. Because until the very last days, he hoped for relief. Hope kept men fighting. Hope killed them too. Back in Berlin, January 30th had been celebrated as the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power. Speeches, banners, declarations of destiny. The following morning, word reaches the Führer that his newly promoted Field Marshal has surrendered. Witnesses later describe Hitler's fury. He had expected suicide. Instead, he received capitulation. The psychological blow is immense. Stalingrad is no longer a battle, it is a catastrophe. Meanwhile, in the northern pocket, General Karl Strecker continues resisting for 2 more days. His forces are starving, surrounded, freezing. On February 2nd, 1943, he sends a final radio message. The 6th Army has ceased fighting. The transmission fades into static. And just like that, it is over. Of nearly 250,000 Axis troops encircled in November, roughly 91,000 march into captivity. Only a fraction will ever return home. The snow absorbs their footprints as they shuffle eastward, columns of gray uniforms moving across white emptiness. Paulus is transported under guard.
February 19, 1943. A train moving east. The windows are sealed with frost. Inside the rail car, German officers sit shoulder to shoulder on wooden benches, their uniforms hanging loose on bodies hollowed by starvation. Guards stand at either end, rifles slung casually, watching without expression. Friedrich Paulus sits near the center. No insignia now, no command post, no map table. Just a man in a worn greatcoat, hands folded, eyes distant. Outside, the Russian landscape slides past in endless white silence. The 6th Army is gone, and he is still alive. The journey ends near Beketova, then farther east. Interrogations begin almost immediately. Soviet officers question him about operations, supply lines, command structures. They are methodical, clinical, not cruel. Paulus answers cautiously. He is a soldier. He gives military facts, avoids politics. But politics will not avoid him. In Berlin, Stalingrad detonates like a bomb inside the regime. Joseph Goebbels delivers his infamous total war speech at the Sportpalast in February 1943, trying to transform catastrophe into renewed fanaticism. He does not dwell on surrender. Instead, he calls for sacrifice,
mobilization, vengeance. But the truth seeps into German households through whispered letters and empty chairs at dinner tables. Nearly every family knows someone lost at Stalingrad. The myth of invulnerability has cracked, and at its center stands the captured Field Marshal, alive. In captivity, Paulus is transferred to a special facility reserved for high-ranking officers. The Soviets understand his symbolic value. He is not beaten, not humiliated. He is isolated, given time. Time to think is a powerful weapon. Weeks pass. Paulus reads newspapers provided by his captors. He studies reports of continued German losses, Kursk, Allied bombing campaigns, the widening fronts. He begins to see the larger picture without the distortion of Führer directives and staff briefings. You can almost feel the internal shift. At Stalingrad, he had obeyed to the end, but obedience led to annihilation. In 1944, something unexpected happens. A group of captured German officers forms the National Committee for a Free Germany under Soviet supervision. They aim to encourage German soldiers to turn against Hitler. At first, Paulus keeps his distance. He had been loyal, professional, apolitical. But the war grinds on. More German cities burn, more armies collapse. Then comes July 20th, 1944, the failed assassination attempt on Hitler. Among those executed afterward is Field Marshal Erwin von Witzleben. Others are hanged with piano wire. Paulus watches from afar. He recognizes the pattern now. The regime devours even its own generals. And something inside him hardens, not against Germany, but against the man who led it into ruin. In August 1944, Friedrich Paulus makes a decision. He agrees to publicly denounce Hitler. The same man who once promoted him to Field Marshal in expectation of suicide now hears his former commander's voice on Soviet radio broadcasts. Paulus calls on German soldiers to abandon a hopeless war. The transformation is staggering. To some, he is a traitor. To others, a realist who finally chose survival over blind loyalty. But the decision carries weight, because it confirms what Stalingrad already proved: the war cannot be won. Years later, at the Nuremberg trials, Paulus will testify against former comrades. He will describe orders, strategies, the inner workings of the Eastern Front. His testimony helps cement the narrative of aggressive war and criminal command.